Hey guys, Society Reviews here, my review of the film 2024's The Crow. The last time we got a movie that took this much heat before its release was Borderlands from a few weeks ago. Borderlands was savage with negative reviews the week leading up to its release and became one of the biggest flops in 2024. As bad as the critical reaction was to that movie, the reaction to 2024's The Crow is even worse. A movie that was infamous for the 1993 on-set accident that killed actor Brandon Lee, son of Bruce Lee. Brandon was shot after a scene where a gun that was supposed to have blanks in it left a dummy round in the chamber of a .44 that struck Brandon in the chest and killed him. With Lee's death, the film became a cult classic and one of the biggest cinematic what-ifs in industry history. 30 years later, Lionsgate decided that they were going to reboot the franchise under the same name as the 1994 film, but the development of this film has been anything but an easy ride. Moral issues aside, the film has spent 16 years in developmental hell with a multitude of actors that at one point were assigned to the project or at the very least offered it. Mark Wahlberg, Channing Tatum, Jason Momoa, Ryan Gosling, Bradley Cooper, James McAvoy, Alexander Skarsgård, Norman Reedus, Nicholas Hoult, and Jack O'Connell are all names of actors who were associated with this project before landing on Bill Skarsgård as the lead of the film. Sometimes it's better to let a project die than to release something that can only be described as mediocre at best. However, Lionsgate had too much money and too much time invested to quit while they were ahead, which leaves us with the 2024 reboot of The Crow. The Crow begins with a troubled and abused kid named Eric who finds himself in an institution for troubled youth, and needless to say, he's not very good at making friends. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, a young girl named Shelly is tied up in a massive cover-up that is tied to a demonic crime lord who has made a deal with the devil to gain power to force anyone to do anything that he pleases. Eric and Shelly end up in the same institution locked away together, and that's where their love story begins. After escaping, the two go into the city in hopes of finding a remnants of a normal life, which is something that neither one of them thought they would be able to enjoy. However, Shelly's past comes back to bite both of them in the worst way, as they are both killed in a cover-up. Alex finds himself in a land between the living and the dead, and he is offered one opportunity to attempt to save Shelly for her fate in hell, and the only way of doing so is killing everyone who was responsible for their deaths. When a movie opens with 6% on Rotten Tomatoes, it is hard to imagine going into a film and not preparing to see the worst thing you've seen all year. While The Crow is certainly not Borderlands level of bad, that sentiment might change depending on how hardcore of a fan you are of the previous movie or the comic book series that birthed it. Lionsgate had a tough call trying to emulate a film that became a cult classic with modern audiences without being accused of giving them an unoriginal ripoff. In an attempt to correct this, they decided to go their own way, which shifts a lot from the original source material. On face value, this is a story about two people who had their lives ripped away from them at the moment when they thought they had finally found what they were looking for. Bill Skarsgård in the film plays the character of Eric, and he did this movie just weeks after wrapping up his previous 2024 film, Boy Kills World. There's not much that is mysterious about his character in the movie. For what we're told, Eric is a troubled kid who has a rough upbringing and is not good with people. O.R.C.A. Twigs, who plays Shelly in the film, becomes the missing piece in his life that presents him with the central motivation of the movie. Eric has lost the only thing in his life that was worth living, so he literally goes to the depths of hell if it means giving her a second chance at life. The problem here is that it creates a few logical gaps in the story by attempting to focus on Eric and Shelly's love story. The two manage to escape what you would think would be a high-security institution, knowing that there are people after them due to Shelly's connection to her previous murder. Despite this knowledge, the protagonists seem to completely ignore the gravity of their situation to play girlfriend and boyfriend in a city until they're caught and brought to their demise. Another logic gap in the movie is the motivation of our villain, played by Danny Hudson. A crime boss with demonic powers, however, the film does not give him the proper explanation to how and why he received these powers in the first place, giving us the implication that there's a lot left on the cutting room floor. A film that stretches 2 hours is a movie that can use a little bit more explanation and exposition to explain the logic gaps in the story. It's hard to tell fans of the original Crow movie to mend their expectations of a reboot that came out nearly 30 years after the original, when the studio itself decided to give it the exact same name of the original movie. The storytelling of this film is a clear step down from the original. The filmmaker suggested that they wanted to stay true to the original comic, but many of the hardcore fans will have a hard time seeing that in the final project. With that said, the movie isn't all bad. Suppose you have no emotional connection to the original film or the comic that birthed it. In that case, The Crow reboot comes off as your average over-the-top action movie that audience has been fed over the last 10 years. The 2024 version is certainly more bloodier than the original, especially when you go into the third act where the movie becomes a shoot-'em-up slash slash-'em-up. The acting in this film is pretty solid, but it's the story that hurts the performance. A script that has been chopped up and passed around for at least 16 years cannot overcome the best attempt at saving the movie that some of our actors try to give. A bit more polishing would have made this film a decent hit in a down year for cinema, but then again, there's no excuse for not being able to polish a movie that's been in the works since 2008. 2024's The Crow is not as bad as the Rotten Tomatoes score will lead you to believe. However, the obvious flaws of the story here are apparent to everyone, which at the end of the day makes this another toothless Hollywood reboot. I give this film a 2 out of 5.